Okay, so now we look at the third round of the Indianapolis Open. And this is an interesting game, partly because if you're on my stream ever, you've probably seen part of this game before. There's one game in particular on stream that I keep going back to. I played a 2509 on lead chess, and there was this interesting position where I missed a tactic. We were checking with the engine after the game, of course, to see improvements on the play that could have been had. And there was this move, and through that game I learned about it, and I've used it in several games since, and this is another, this time over the board game, where I get to use that move. So when we get there, I'm sure many of you will recognize the moment. But anyway, let's go ahead and play through this. Much like the first game of this event, the game actually continues the same way. So we get c6, the Carl Khan, as I mentioned before in video 1 of this series. Pawn goes to d4, d5, knight to c3, pawn captures, knight captures, and knight out. Now here is where it changes. Now in the prior game, John had played the knight back to g3 in game 1 there, but in this game we see white do the not that we see white play knight takes knight, and so this is the continuation I talked about, where I have to take with the g pawn, so the g pawn recaptured, and then there's several moves here, but white in this case played bishop to f4, and I played the usual h5, which you guys see me do a lot if you watch the stream. So h5, queen to d2, knight out, and so with this knight, assuming they were to castle queenside immediately, we would have moves like this, like knight to b6, knight to d5, kicking the bishop. Occasionally they'll play the bishop back, and then they can sometimes get caught with a move like bishop out here. But anyway, we'll go ahead and just play through this game. Bishop out, and so now white, when you castle queenside, I think many people are taught, play the king to b1, right? That's kind of a standard thing you do when you castle queenside. And so in order to secure that square, white plays a very natural bishop to d3. So bishop d3, bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, and now I reach a position where I'm remembered that game with McNulty, the 2509 on lead chess. And the only difference in that game is in this position, my queen in that game was actually here. My queen is out here on the a5 square. But it doesn't matter if it's on a5 or in this case d7. So I actually played queen to d7 to set up the trap, and some of you guys know what this trap is. And the idea is that if white makes the most, let's say, natural move in the position, or one of the more natural moves, that king to b1 move that we're all taught to play, it's like when you play in such a way where you castle queenside, you play king to b1. It's like the move that's supposed to help you stay safer from checks. Of course, white is evaluating that my bishop on f8 could come to h6 with check in the future. That check might cause a problem, especially if my queen is on the light square diagonal. So rather than having to deal with that, this king move, right? So that happens in the game, and then this is exactly the moment. So now is when that game online, I knew about this tactic, and it wins material, and it's something that's, if you haven't seen it before from the white side, if I go ahead and flip this board around, I think it's something that's kind of hard to see. Like, if I'm looking at this board and I'm playing the white pieces, I wouldn't necessarily have seen it either, having not seen that game that I told you guys about. Because it's one of those things where, we don't see many games like this, I guess. Anyway, the move, and maybe you guys should pause the video again. We'll give you give you that chance to pause the video if you guys want to try to find this for yourself. I know some of you haven't watched the stream and seen this a bunch of times. Go ahead and pause right now, and obviously there aren't that many pieces developed, or a lot of things maybe you could think about here, but black has a move that wins material, and let's see if you guys pause the video if you guys can spot that move. So take a moment now, pause it, and then I'll continue in a moment. Okay, so we'll assume you guys took a minute, you paused the video, and maybe somewhat quickly you found it. Now, when looking for a shot like this, one thing that can help is first maybe looking at where the king is at, right? So you think, okay, king's here. Many times when you're winning material, it's based on a check, so somehow you'd make the opponent have to respond to your move, right? So you start thinking well, how could I check the king? And maybe after thinking for a while, you come up with a move like this. You might be like, you know what, I could play knight takes pawn, and that would move the queen off of this diagonal, so this diagonal is open, and then this queen could come in with check, right, and harass this bishop. So that's kind of the surprise, is that knight takes c4 removes the queen from the light square diagonal, allowing a check, And then just to make sure you don't blunder in a position like this, the other thing you want to check too is that this bishop doesn't have a target. Like, this move's pretty bad if the bishop could take on h6, or if the bishop could take on b8, right? So you would also want to check to make sure that the piece that you're going to try to win doesn't have a move right now, like maybe like bishop takes knight, or if it was on c7. But the idea is you got to make sure these squares that the bishop is maybe threatening don't have anything, right? Because if they did have something, unless the knight was really threatening something, that's been threatening b2 in a way, the bishop might be able to just take something else, right? So in this case, there's no target for that bishop, so everything's pretty much perfect here for this move, right? So we take, queen takes back, oops, sorry, I got a little goofy move there, but okay, queen takes back, check the king, and take the bishop. And the thing that's different about the Caro-Kann than maybe some other openings is, like, the difference of a pawn can be felt a bit more. It's a very solid opening. You tend to have pretty solid structures. And some of you right now are probably thinking, like, well, what about, like, what if they play like immediate d5? Well, they can't, because the queen would fall off the board, right? The queen would be threatened. So then you might say, what about rook over here? Rook over. Might have been an idea, attacking this pawn. We could defend with the rook. I wouldn't want to castle because I dropped this pawn. I could also play queen back to c7. Then maybe they could try d5. But anyway, that didn't happen in the game. They played knight to f3. And after this move, I played e6, just covering the f7 square, preparing to castle. Rook came over to e1. So white has really nice development now. They're well centralized. There's maybe some pressure on e6. There could be an idea of a sacrifice there, or maybe even once this queen is removed, a pawn capture, right? But or sorry, pawn thrust and then maybe capturing. But I went ahead and just castled. So I move away from the rook's pin in my pawn and castle. And the king goes to a1, so just kind of moving off that diagonal. And then I played h4, just kind of keeping the knight off. Well, it's not obvious yet why the knight would go there, but it's just kind of holding a square from the knight if my queen moves away. So queen threatens pawn, king to b8, rook. And so now the threat here is actually, just let me open that, is actually queen takes, right, because of the pin. So queen takes pawn is threatened, so I play rook to c8 to cover that pawn. And make exchanges here and drop back to d6, and then rook e to e3. Now, as soon as I saw this move, I thought, man, this back rank is looking pretty empty, right? There's no longer a piece protecting the back rank, and that's going to be important in a moment. So I play queen to d5, just kind of eyeing a square behind the knight, okay? And that's important. And when my opponent plays rook e to c3, just trying to add more pressure to my king side, right? All these pieces kind of maybe attacking or helping in an attack over there. What's wide open actually is this, right? So you begin thinking about, how could I get this queen to maybe have a threat of like going here, right? And if you think about that, you probably come up pretty quick with my move. Rook takes h2. So now if the knight takes, I would just have queen checks, and then there's no coordination here. Like if the queen was maybe guarding this square, then like a rook could drop back this way, but that's not the case. So there's no piece that could come back and stop the mate, right? So knight can't take the rook because queen checks would lead to mate. The knight would go in the way it takes, rook would go in the way it takes, game over. So this rook, even though it looks like it could be taken, can't be taken here. And for that reason, white covers the back rank with rook to c1. And I played rook to h3. So just put pressure on this pawn, move the rook away from the eyes of the knight attacking it, right? And then my opponent then played the move queen to a6, so threatening checkmate. And after my next move, my opponent resigned. So if you guys want to look for that move, I guess saying that it probably helps you guys know better what it might be, but my next move was made and the opponent just immediately resigned. So, but we will look at a line beyond the move, just to kind of talk about something real quick that could have happened, just to kind of show how that would have worked, because you guys might, watching the video, you might right now see something and be like, wait, why would that be over? So pause it, see if you guys can find the move, and then I'll keep talking. Alright, so I'm assuming you guys paused the video, we're back, and the move was queen takes rook. So the problem is if white just recaptures, I take the queen, and then if we just count the remaining pieces, I have a rook, a bishop, another rook, and all that white has is this knight and rook, right? So I actually have a whole rook extra, right? Now, for that reason, white shouldn't take my queen. Instead, white could have tried, he resigned here, the game was over, but they could have tried queen back here, okay? And that looks like it does it, right? It looks like, oh, maybe that solves everything. Threatens a rook, queen still threatened, but we still have a move. So let's follow this thing through. So if I play the queen to e3, I threaten this rook, so a capture of this rook would give this rook giving mate, right? Again, white has another move here. They could play the rook over, attack the queen. But yet again, we have a move. We play the queen back to h6, and now we've kept the extra rook. Our king is still relatively safe. We still have this bishop here, you know, so it's totally our game still, right? But just wanted to show that line in case you guys were noticing that. I don't know if anybody, you know, in the time you guys paused the video saw that or not, but after queen takes b3, there was a little bit to be resolved if this queen to f1 move was tried, and I would have had these moves, you know, queen to e3, and then queen to h6, and it's questionable at this point how white is going to get counterplay, you know, for the lost material. But anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed this round of the Indianapolis Open. So obviously the event had started out quite well at this point. I had a draw my first round, a win my second round. This is the third round where I had another win. It's feeling pretty good, right? Not very often you start an event this well. In fact, for myself, I will say most events I played chess in, I typically would get like a draw or a win the first round, a loss or a draw the second round, and then maybe come back and win after that loss or draw. So if you played a lot of tournaments yourself, you're probably aware that the pairings change based on how you're performing. So as you do better in an event, you're paired up with other players that are doing better. You basically play people with the same score or a similar score as what you have. So as you win, you're playing other people that are winning. As you lose, you'd most likely be playing other people that are losing. And in that way, you kind of have this like scenario where as you lose, you're more likely to win, and as you win, you're more likely to lose. So it's kind of fun. It makes it very, very competitive and very enjoyable. So if you haven't played in a tournament before, I definitely recommend that you get out there and just try it sometime. Like just sign up for a local event, something that maybe isn't going to be too stressful on you in terms of like getting there and everything, and then just see if you like it. I had never played tournaments before, let's say like 1996, and I immediately after my first tournament was like, this is for me. Like I really enjoyed the experience a lot, and I hope that if you're watching this and you're into chess, that you too find the opportunity to take time and go play these events. And I know I go through these games kind of fast. My goal here is really just to present the game as it happened with maybe a few improvements or ideas, but really I'm trying to keep the game as pure as possible. And I will say for my opponent's sake, the guy I thought a long time, really careful player. The only reason I really won this game is just the knowledge of my opening, right? You guys have seen me play this a lot on stream, and that awareness of the c4 pawn being a target is what helped me win this game. So again, when you're trying to improve at chess and get ready for tournament play, kind of playing a similar opening or getting an idea of how you play a certain opening and playing that a lot, it gives you that feel for it, right? Where maybe something you learn through analyzing your games online helps you improve it over the board. So I know we all try to maybe learn lots of openings and be very wide in what we play, and I definitely try to go pretty wide with what I play, but it's definitely helpful to kind of focus on one for a while. So for myself, it's usually about 150 games is what I go on, so I want to play 150 blitz or online games, and then after those 150 games of actually playing the opening, analyzing the opening, then I'll take it to an event. So and this Carl Khan line has been done a lot by me. So I've had some games where it was like a bad loss with it, and other games where it was a win. But it has scored well online. I figured I'd try it in the event. So hopefully you enjoyed this, and we'll see you guys soon with round 4 coming up. Hopefully you're enjoying these games, and if you like it, go ahead and subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you guys on the channel again soon. Bye, everybody.